What if everything you've been told about being too much is proof of something extraordinary? Carl Jung, one of psychology's greatest minds, once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what if who you truly are doesn't fit the mold? If you've ever been called too sensitive, too intense, or too deep, this might explain why. Jung believed some people are born with what he called differentiated consciousness, a rare way of experiencing life that's more emotionally aware, more curious, and more intuitive than most people ever develop. While society might misunderstand these traits, Jung saw them as signs of advanced psychological development. Today, we're exploring 8 unmistakable signs you might have this rare personality type. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, it won't just change how you see your past. It might transform your entire future. Sign 1. You experience deep emotions that others can't understand. Jung discovered something remarkable about emotional intensity. He found that certain people don't just feel emotions, they live them. Your feelings run deep, like ocean currents, moving through you in ways that transform your entire experience. This isn't emotional instability, it's emotional sophistication. You notice when someone's smile doesn't match their eyes. You feel the energy shift in a room. You carry the emotional undercurrents of every interaction because your mind is wired for depth, not surface-level pleasantries. But here's what happens. The world tells you to tone it down, to be more reasonable, and to stop being so dramatic. Jung understood that when you suppress this emotional depth, you don't become normal, you become split inside. Part of you knows the truth, while another part tries to conform. This is why you've probably felt exhausted trying to be someone you're not. Jung believed your emotional intensity is like a radar system. When you embrace it instead of fighting it, it becomes your greatest gift. Sign 2. You question everything with relentless curiosity. According to Jung, most people live unconscious lives, accepting social programming without examination. But you can't help but dig deeper. You don't just ask what, you ask why. Why do people stay in relationships that make them miserable? Why do we accept systems that don't serve us? Why do we pretend shallow conversations are meaningful? Jung referred to this as the transcendent function, the ability to see beyond current limitations. While others accept the status quo, you're already seeing what could be different, what could be better, what could be more authentic. But here's the challenge. Your questions threaten other people's comfortable illusions. When you ask deep questions, you're not just seeking answers, you're challenging the psychological defenses that keep people feeling safe in their limitations. This is why you've probably been called cynical or negative when you're actually being courageously honest. Jung discovered that people like you have what he called prophetic consciousness. You see where things are heading before others do. Sign 3. You've developed fierce independence through necessity. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." You've learned to do exactly this, not by choice, but by necessity. Your independence isn't a defensive mechanism, it's an achievement. You've learned through painful experience that depending on others for your sense of worth is quicksand. So you built yourself up. You stood alone and created an identity that couldn't be taken away by someone else's opinion or absence. Jung called this individuation, the psychological journey toward becoming whole. Most people never complete this journey because it requires facing what Jung called the shadow, all the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. Your independence attracts people who want to possess it and repels people who feel threatened by it. You don't need someone to complete you because you've done the work of becoming complete. This means you don't seek relationships from desperation. You seek them from choice. Sign 4. You have intuitive awareness that borders on psychic. Jung revolutionized psychology when he identified intuition as a legitimate psychological function. Some people's nervous systems are wired to pick up information that others miss entirely. You don't just observe people, you read their psychological state. You notice the micro-expressions, the energy shifts, and the words they don't say. When someone says they're fine but their body language screams distress, you can't unsee it. When there's tension in a room that everyone ignores, you feel it in your bones. This isn't paranoia. It's psychological sensitivity operating at a high level. But Jung warned that if you don't learn to protect this sensitivity, it will exhaust you. You often become an unconscious therapist, doing emotional labor for everyone around you, regulating conversations, diffusing tension, and carrying unspoken pain. The danger is becoming so skilled at reading others that you forget to check in with yourself. You scan constantly for emotional data while your own needs go unmet. Sign 5. You crave meaning over social acceptance. Jung discovered that certain personalities are psychologically incapable of living fake lives. You don't choose meaning over popularity, your mind demands it. You've probably tried living for external validation, following the script, saying the right things, and playing the expected role. But Jung would recognize the symptoms, that gnawing emptiness, that sense of betraying something essential, that quiet desperation beneath the applause. According to Jung, when you live against your psychological type, you don't just feel uncomfortable, you develop what he called neurotic symptoms. Your mind rebels against fakeness. You can't pretend shallow goals matter. You can't get excited about achievements without substance. You can't build relationships based on convenience rather than connection. Your psychological makeup won't allow it. When you refuse to settle for less than an authentic connection, you force others to confront their lack of authenticity. When you live according to your values rather than your fears, you permit others to do the same. Sign 6. You've outgrown people and environments that once fit. Jung said, "The greatest tragedy is unlived lives." But what happens when you refuse to live an unlived life? What happens when you grow beyond your environment's limitations? Jung discovered that psychological growth is often a solitary journey. You've likely experienced the painful realization that people who once knew you don't understand you anymore. Not because you've become difficult, but because you've shed layers of conditioning that no longer serve you. Jung called this psychological death and rebirth. The friends who knew you when you were people-pleasing, when you were suppressing your truth, remember that version of you. Sometimes they want that version back because it felt safer and more predictable. But you can't go back. Jung understood that psychological evolution is irreversible. Once you've seen behind the curtain of social conditioning, once you've tasted authentic living, you can't return to unconscious conformity. This creates what Jung called the night of the soul, profound loneliness that tests your commitment to authenticity. But those who successfully navigate this transition attract relationships of extraordinary depth and authenticity. Sign 7. You offer deep presence in a distracted world. Jung said the meeting of two personalities is like contact between two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. You have the rare ability to create what Jung called psychological holding space. When someone speaks to you, they feel seen uncommonly. You don't just listen to words, you perceive their underlying emotional state. You don't offer quick fixes, you offer deep witnessing. You don't rush to judgment, you create space for truth to emerge. In your company, people remember what it feels like to be fully human. But Jung identified a crucial insight. People with this gift often exhaust themselves by giving it too freely. You've probably become the unofficial therapist, emotional anchor, or safe harbor for others. While this makes you valuable, it can make you invisible. You become so skilled at holding space for others that you forget to ask for space yourself. The work isn't to stop caring, it's to learn discernment, understanding who deserves access to your emotional presence and who has earned the right to give back. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe, not just for more content, but to join a growing space where truth, healing, and self-discovery matter. This is Psyche Thera, and your journey is just beginning. Sign 8. You sense a larger purpose you can't yet define. Jung said, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. If you feel a persistent sense that you're meant for something more than ordinary, Jung would recognize this as what he called archetypal calling. You feel that restlessness, knowing that you have something to contribute, something to build, something to say. It might not be clear yet, but it's undeniable. This isn't about fame or recognition, it's about alignment, the psychological necessity of living in harmony with your deepest nature. Jung's most profound insight: your calling isn't just personal, it's transpersonal. You're not just here to fulfill yourself, you're here to serve the evolution of consciousness itself. Through your depth, your questions, and your refusal to accept shallow answers, you help humanity grow. This is why you can't settle for ordinary. This is why surface-level connections feel empty. Your mind knows you have work to do, and that work requires authenticity, depth, and courage. Final words. If even half of these signs resonated with you, you're not just different. You're part of what Jung called the leading edge of human consciousness. You're one of the people pushing our species toward greater awareness, deeper truth, and more authentic connection. Yes, it's lonely sometimes. Yes, it's misunderstood. Yes, it requires more courage than most people will ever need. But Jung believed people like you are essential for humanity's psychological evolution. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. Your intensity isn't too much, it's exactly what the world needs. Your refusal to settle isn't difficult, it's brave. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. You're learning to do exactly that, and in doing so, you're permitting others to do the same. Remember, you're not too much, the world is too little, and people like you are the ones who change that.